Or about basic Excel accessibility. My name is Richard Steinberg. I've been doing this presentation for at least a dozen years at Access U. I'm always grateful that they invite me back. And if only I can advance my slides. Okay, so I'm not going to go into a big biography with me. Basically, I worked for the state of Texas for various agencies, retired, and then Wells Fargo picked me up as they have an accessibility program. And I will not go into the boring details, but trust me, I'm sure we all have lots of tales of our careers. So, but I wanted to say I did get into accessibility because I am also a writer for a local newspaper, and I'd gotten a tip that Yellow Cab of Austin was hiring blind dispatchers. You know, cab drivers, they have to see where they're going, but the people who are answering the phones, this is back before Uber and Lyft and all that, they were the ones answering the phone and taking in the instructions about where to send the cabs, and then dispatching to the cab drivers, go to this corner there. So I wrote that, and I was like, wow, they've engineered their whole company around using screen reader. So, and that's what they had done. They were using JAWS at the time. This is about 2006. So anyway, that's what got me interested in accessibility. And then now it's my career. First, how many of you have some experience with accessibility? By raise of hands. So most of you have some experience. All right, so I can skip the boring stuff about screen reader basics, which is what I had here. But let me go on to the next slide. There are basically 9 requirements that I'm going to go over one at a time. And it's not easy to remember all this stuff. So fortunately, you'll be able to download the presentation and look at it. But these are basic rules that you should follow. We'll start with the first one. Start in the A1 cell. Now, some people here, maybe you're fixing somebody else's Excel file, and they like using that first row for a margin, because it looks prettier. That's okay, but you could put some text in the first cell that describes what this sheet is about. It could be white text on a white background. It doesn't even have to be big. It could be 6-point type. But a screen reader user is most likely going to go to the top of the file and start from there and navigate through it. So start your content in the A1 cell. And if the sheet's long or it's complex, you can even put instructions in there. You could just type across and have it go into more than one column. And then when visual sighted users open the spreadsheet, they'll get when they open the spreadsheet, they won't see that text. Or maybe you want sighted users to see the text. This is a spreadsheet about whatever, the title of what you're trying to present. That's the rule about it. And if you want, you can have visually hidden text in that cell too that says this is a spreadsheet with 3 sheets that contain so many data tables. You're trying to make it as understandable as you can. So that's my advice, is just put some text in there if you want that. If somebody's saying I want a top margin, fine, but put some text in there that non-sighted users can navigate to. So that's the start in the A1 rule. The next thing has to do with the grid. This is probably one of the more controversial ones. So you know how it's a grid, but when you start adding stuff to it, like charts, or maybe you've got a macro that generates a menu or something like that, it's even more complicated. I'm not that advanced in Excel that I would be able to do anything other than a pivot table, but all that stuff is floating on top of the grid. So if you can, stay in the grid. If you have a pivot table or a pie chart, you can refer back, you can have the data on another sheet and refer to it. If you add stuff like text boxes or word art, that's also going to be floating on top of the grid. And a person who's using a screen reader isn't going to be able to reach it. They're not going to basically know that it exists. Instead of it like a text box, you can just put text in a cell. You don't have to have it floating on top of the grid. For images and charts, you can put in alt text. There's a way to do that in Excel. You right-click on it and enter in the alt text for it. And underneath that alt text, in the cells, underneath the chart, or whatever, you can put information underneath it in the grid so that if a person can't reach the actual chart itself, they'll still be able to navigate it to the grid, and they can hear, there's a pie chart that's based on the data in these cells and this table, whatever it is. And that way you're presenting at least some information to people who can't reach out of the grid. I know it's kind of crazy, but I had someone come to me recently who had a macro that generated some special menu, where people could dynamically interact with it, and I explained to them, a screen reader user can't reach that special menu that you've created because it's above the grid. Yes, question.
Did you say that charts, it's better to put them on a sheet of their own and refer to it in?
It doesn't have to be on the sheet of its own. I know that some people design it that way. They'll have a chart, and that's the first sheet, and it's referring to a table that's on the 20th sheet. So you can put it all on one sheet, though. You don't have to have it on a separate sheet.
So would you and you said images float, but they should have alt text. So if you do put an image, do you put alt text on the image and a caption maybe in a cell?
You can do that, or you could have the floating chart underneath the chart. You could write something into the cells that explains, here's a chart based on data in these cells. And it shows that our sales were up 19% in 2019, and whatever. You could put in as much information as you want, and again, you could even make it very small point size. So, and then sighted users don't even know it's there. Was there another question? Yes.
Yes, I'm not sure I understood correctly, but so you would not put a pivot table in a chart? Or you would not put a pivot table in there, say if there was a drop-down menu or something like that?
You can't. I was saying that people who have sight issues, or maybe they have a physical disability and they're sighted, they can't use their keyboard to get to it necessarily. You can use a pivot table. But I'm saying the data. If the data itself is accessible, then at least you're giving people with disabilities, the users, a way to access that information. Okay. I can switch over to Excel at some point. I've got some examples, I think. Okay, this gets back to the design issue. There are a lot of people who like making the first column blank because it looks pretty. It's like you're putting a margin on there. Or they like merging cells, or splitting cells, something like that. The problem is if you're making a table like the one on the right here, task completion date of, those would read okay, but the top line, the row 1, a screen reader user wouldn't know that that column header applies to both columns. You can also, instead of merging cells, you could leave it all in one cell and just have it span across 2 columns or whatever many columns it is. And if somebody's a designer and they don't like that there's no white space on the left side, you could select the text and indent it, like I show in the example on the lower left. That gives you that white margin that people like to have sometimes. Now you can use I was just saying, when you have blank rows, blank columns, depending on how many you have, it could make a screen reader user lost, like where am I on this sheet? So you can put a blank row between two tables that are on the same sheet, but don't have all this white space. You can adjust the size of the row if you need to. And you can even put some hidden text in that blank row, just saying this is table two of 4 or whatever, and you can put that inside the cell. Now, I work for a bank, and we have a lot of tables. People are checking their balances. Actually, in my case, it's corporations are checking their balances. And very complex tables, of course, they're in HTML, but there's no money in that account, or there's less than no money, they owe money. So what a designer will do is they'll say 0, or they'll have a blank cell. It's the same deal with Excel. If there's no data, say no data, there are a couple guys who fix PDFs, Chad Chelix and what's the other guy's name? They actually did a screen reader test. If you put n/a for no data, instead of not applicable or whatever, and the screen reader is not going to know that means not applicable or whatever. It tries to pronounce NA as na, which is not what you're trying to accomplish. So you can, you can even, if you wanted to, say this cell is intentionally left blank in very small type, but
You're gonna read it every time.
yeah. But again, you could use that same visually hidden text, white text on a white background, and at least screen reader user knows they're not missing anything. But if you put NA, then again, JAWS, NVDA, VoiceOver, they're going to say nah. And I suppose that some users don't understand what that means.
Can you put null?
Yeah.
Okay.
Null is a word you can say. Yeah, and sometimes that's the case. It's not this or that. It's not that you've run out of money. But at least you're communicating something.
Question on that.
Okay.
Did I hear correctly that screen reader users can't navigate a chart in Excel?
No, it's hard to. It's hard to navigate a chart in Excel. It's best to put the chart's data in a table that is in the grid, and then screen reader users can navigate the data at least. But the chart itself is hard to get to. Depends on the disability. So okay, we've gone through the blank rows. Are there any questions on that? I'll go on to the next one. If you have rows and columns that you're not using, you can hide those. I mean, when we open up Excel, we get that sheet with hundreds of rows and hundreds of columns. Well, there's a way to hide it. Can I get your help for a second? Mm-hmm. I'm going to need to switch from sharing my PowerPoint to sharing. I'm going to open a Excel file. Okay, so finally got into Excel. So this is your standard. You open up Excel. The sheet doesn't have a name other than sheet 1, and this stuff goes on and on forever. Well, let's say you're only using this portion of the sheet. You can hide all the other rows and columns. If you go here and do, Control Shift left, right arrow, you'll select every other row, every other column that's in the file, and then if you right-click on this area, you can hide it. So now you've got a lot less real estate because you weren't using it to begin with. The same thing goes for the rows. You can do Control Shift down arrow. I'm sorry, I don't know what the command is in Apple, but Control Shift down arrow, you get the same effect here. Look at that, you got is that 1,000,000 rows? You can hide that the same way. And now, so screen reader user will know, and actually sighted users too might benefit from hiding all this unused stuff because it's just a white space. Now, if you were a screen reader user, you'd be going maybe across the top row or whatever row you're using, and it just goes on forever. And the screen reader user's like blank, 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 blank for 100,000 times. So this way, you're kind of giving a boundary so that the screen reader user knows the boundaries of the sheet. And
Control plus shift plus down
and control shift and right. And you can unhide it if you need to. If like say you've got some more data in there, but it's a nicety. I think it looks cleaner too. If you just hide everything you're not using. Okay, so now I go to Zoom. Let me get my notes out here. So we did the hide unused rows and columns. Hopefully that's not too controversial. Okay, so as I was saying, if you merge cells, a screen reader user is not going to know that. Oops, didn't mean to do that. A screen reader user is not going to be able to associate title of my spreadsheet on the top row, that it applies to all the columns underneath it. So avoid using it, and you could just have the text centered across the columns. You don't have to merge them. And I know in very complex cells, like let's say the second example where it says missed both tests. A screen reader user wouldn't know that it applies to test 1 and test 2. So you probably couldn't fit that text in both cells, but you could also make it wider. I know it seems nicer looking maybe, but if you merge cells, then a screen reader user wouldn't understand that test 1 and test 2 applies to both. Yeah, the missed both tests applies to test 1 and test 2. I guess I'll move on to them here. Okay, so remember we opened that worksheet up and it said sheet 1, and then you add another sheet and it says sheet 2. You can go into that tab and give it a name. What is this thing? Why is this sheet here? Is it data for another sheet? Or is it a table of contents of some sort? So give your worksheet something other than the default sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3, etc. And for that matter, if you got a bunch of unused sheets in your file, delete them. What are they there for? So you can delete the sheets that are not being used. All right.
Are you still in number 2 on your agenda?
No, actually, we're up to number 6. We're about to do 6, but I've got more after that. Oops. Let me go back here. I gotta go. Where was I on here? Okay, number so the worksheet names. I think that's pretty straightforward, and you can give it a descriptive title. Like this is successfully training. It could be summer sales or whatever it is. You just give it summer sales 2025, something that really describes what the sheet is. Okay, so row and column headers. There's something in Excel called a name manager. You don't have to do it this way, but you can define a table as being one entity. This is probably the most complicated way of making a table. I'm just going to type in title. If only I could type. I'll make this bold and I'll make it big, and I can fool around with I can fool around with the margins and stuff, but let's say this is column, well, let's say, I'm going to give it something real, name, email, and I'll say Richard because I know that's okay, and if I do this again next year, I'll have a sample already. And let's see, I'll pick someone on my team. Oops, I can't type. God, I'm really having trouble typing on the spot here, guys. I'm not used to having the internet look at me while I'm typing, It's like, it's kind of unnerving, if you must know. I'll extend this out here. So now we have a little table. So one of the problems when you're working with people who are visually impaired are getting their table, they're not necessarily associating everything in the first column with name or everything in the second column with email. They're just going left to right and then top to bottom. So there's no relationship. If you were to do this in Word, you can do it. In HTML, it's really easy, but obviously this is a spreadsheet class. So they're going to start from the top, go down, and what we want is for a screen reader user to hear, let's say they're over here, and then they say, oh, I'm moving back to the first column. You want them to hear that header name whenever they go back, or if they go here, you want them to hear email. So they're not going to, so if I go down here and then I go back, they're not going to hear name. They're just going to hear Emily. So what we want is to have them repeat, listen, when they listen through their screen reader, we want them to repeat what they're hearing. So to do this, you go to the Formulas tab and you select something that's kind of, oh, it's not hidden. It used to be less hard, and you just select the first cell on the table and select Name Manager, which I'm not sure if any of you have ever seen this or not. You select Name Manager and you type in you select New, and you give it, names, email, something like that. And it's referring to, well, right at this point, it's not referring to the whole table yet. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading these instructions, trying to remember here.
So if you click into refers to, I think you
Yeah, that's what it is. Well, actually,
Excuse me, what are you under in the ribbon there? What did you
I went to Formulas, and then I selected the Name Manager.
Oh, okay.
You may not want to remember this because there's an easier way of doing this, but this is something you can do. But you give it a name, like names and email addresses, and then you would select the cells that are the beginning and end point. So in this case, like that. And now when a screen reader user gets to this table, they're going to know that all this information is associated together. I'm sorry about that. Does that make sense? You're giving it a name, and screen reader users are going to hear, oh, there's a table on this sheet that's called names and email addresses. And the reason why I say you may not want to remember this, because this is the old-fashioned way of doing it, there's an easier way to do it. You start off by, well, let me select this table again. You select this table and you say Format as Table. This is on the home screen. And it gives you these designs which you may not want to use, but you can always change what your design looks like. Let's say I pick this, and there's this little checkbox here that says, my table has headers. Isn't that a lot easier than using the name manager? You've done it in one step. Sometimes you got to figure out which is the easiest thing to correct. But if you do it this way, then if someone's in the JAWS screen reader, they're going to hear name when they're working their way down this, row to row, and they'll hear email if they're in this row. And you can take the sort off on these cells, because we're not, unless you want to do sort. Where's that under sort and filter?
Data. It's under data.
Right, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit rusty on this aspect of it. So yeah, turn off the filter. There we go. And then you can make it whatever color scheme you want to. Black and white's pretty good for colorblind users, so but you may not want black on like that, you may want it gray. But anyway, if you've defined your table that way, or you create your table that way, then you don't have to use the whole name manager thing, which I remember, 10 years ago, that was the only way you could define table headers in an Excel file. So, okay, let's see, I'm going to stop share again. And I'm going to go back to share and back to the PowerPoint show. Share it. Okay, we're back in PowerPoint. So, were there any questions on that? I know it's a little bit funky. If not, I'll move on. Yeah, I've tested this in JAWS. I cannot get it to work with VoiceOver or NVDA, that thing that I just showed you. It just doesn't tell you what column you're in as you're moving your way down the sheet. And I tested that, I guess, obviously the newer versions of JAWS it works with. And we're kind of locked down on our computers. I can't download the latest version of NVDA, so I tried it on my personal computer, and I still couldn't get it to announce. So hopefully, if you've got visually impaired people accessing your spreadsheets, they're using JAWS. Otherwise, they're just going to realize, I got to go, let's say it's 100 rows deep, they're going to have to remember, what column am I in? But their changes come in every year with the NVDA, so I'm hopeful that will get fixed eventually. Oh, this is just me demonstrating what I just showed you.
I have a question.
Okay.
So how does it change the experience for the person using the screen reader, making it into a table and actually putting a header versus just having all of the data on the spreadsheet? What do they hear in the screen reader?
They would just hear the data without knowing what column they were in.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, it would just be...
So it gives them sort of a reference of where they are?
Yes.
Nice.
It announced to them. In fact, I could play this video. Let's see if it... Well, let's see. I'll have to stop sharing. Let me start this up here. Let me pause it. This is actually JAWS announcing in a table that's been, I assume this is the one I did where it's formatted. Okay, so what I was trying to explain is if you have, darn it. If you don't, if you're in JAWS and you navigate, like say John Doe is in the name column, if you move your right arrow over to where it says the addresses, JAWS will announce they're in the address column or the city column or the state column. NVDA apparently doesn't do that yet, but JAWS does. So that's how having table headers helps at least JAWS users. And if you're in a corporate environment, I've worked in places where they wanted JAWS because it's not freeware. NVDA is great for the general public, but maybe you're in a corporate environment where the people are using JAWS anyway just to test things. I don't know. How many people here, first of all, how many people here have worked with a screen reader to test anything? Okay, so we got a few people. Okay, and may I ask, out of those people, how many were like, you were forced to use a certain screen reader because your company told you that this is all you can use? One, couple, 3 people. Okay, yeah. So if you're in a, yeah, some IT departments are scared of things like NVDA because you can download it and it can update itself and all that. So
In my case, it's because that's what our staff uses. They use JAWS.
yeah.
So that's why we use it.
What someone just said in the audience, that's what the staff are using is JAWS. So if you're working with JAWS users and Excel, this is one way to help them out so they know where they are. Okay, let me move on to the alt text. So you can add alt text to the chart by right-clicking on it and adding an alt text, and that may be reachable for certain users, but you can also try to write it out, and alt text is usually it's usually a very short description. You know, this is, you know, work successes in whatever, March 2025. It's not this long explanation. You can write out, as I point out with the arrow here in the box text, this is the details. And you can put that underneath the picture so that a screen reader user is going to hear what is the chart title about, you know, so that's what I was trying to say. Because alt text shouldn't be this paragraph of text that has all the numbers in it and stuff anyway. So this way you're going to explain the details, and sighted users won't see it. It's going to be out of sight. And if a screen reader user wants to reference the data, they can go to the actual, and you can even say in your text underneath, it's hidden underneath it. You can even say this is referring to table whatever, you know, give it which is in cells A2 through D6. You could even put that much detail in this text. It's underneath the picture itself, and you're covered. That all users can access the data. They know what the chart is about. Does that make sense? And of course, you want, if you're using charts, you have to go into this other thing like, well, people who are colorblind understand the color schemes you're using. That's a whole other story, which I'll get into in a little bit. But yeah, we don't want to have colors that people can't tell the different bars, colors, or pie chart colors. So I explain a little bit about some safe colors that you can use without being a big accessibility expert. A question?
So the text that you type in under the chart, is that in another cell, or is that embedded within the chart?
No. It's gonna. So the chart is floating over the grid. You're putting it under the chart in the grid.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay.
again, sighted users don't even know it's there, and you're giving a better explanation than just using alt text for the image anyway.
I'd like your opinion about another alternative for text. How about just changing the color of the text to like white so that if
You can, but then
a sighted person won't see it?
You
But
can
if you
do
were
that, but
Okay.
but if you do that, then is it going to look like a blank row underneath your chart?
Right.
If you hide it in a cell underneath the physical chart, then you can do white on white if you want,
Okay.
or whatever your most people have white background on their spreadsheet.
Someone in the chat asked, do you just type the details on the cell?
Yeah. Go for it. Write a whole novel's worth of information about what the chart's describing. And then if it's a nicety to say, oh, by the way, this chart that you can't navigate to is based on the table that begins in this cell and ends in this cell, so that a screen reader user can know what you're talking about. But yeah, you can put it in a cell. It could be in one of those cells to the right of the chart. You can put it there in 6-point type well, actually, yeah. I mean, I would put it underneath though, because screen reader users are navigating left to right, top to bottom. If you put it off over here somewhere, they may not know because. Think of it, they're going to navigate left to right, and they're just going to hear blank, 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 and then they get to the 4th or 5th column, and they finally hear text. They may give up after a few columns worth of blank data. So I would stick it, like in the A, somewhere, well, assuming you chart somewhere in the A column, I would put it somewhere there. Any other questions on that? Okay, so it's helpful when your worksheet's done or your workbook is done to put the words end of worksheet or end of workbook. And if you have a boss who doesn't like that, you can do white text on white background. But as I said, screen reader users going left to right, and I'm sorry, I'm probably opposite, and then top to bottom. And when they reach that end of worksheet, end of workbook in the first cell in the A column they get to, then they'll say, okay, this is over. Assuming you haven't hidden all the rows like I showed you earlier. At least they'll know, okay, there's no more information on this thing. This is the last thing of the 9 steps. When you save an Excel file, let's say you're in the middle of worksheet 3 and in the middle somewhere, that's where a person, when they open the file, that's where it's going to be. It's going to be that last cell that you were working on. So it's a nicety to, before you save it, go to the A1 cell in the first worksheet and then save it there. Unless you have a real, purpose for starting somebody in the middle of a workbook. There's a spell check in Excel. I would check your spelling. There's also a way to set the print area. I don't know if you all know how to do that. I can show you. Any takers? You got comments, get rid of them. Don't, because they're just going to confuse people. I mean, why do they want to read comments on when 10 people working on a workbook? You want to get rid of that stuff. It's more professional, unless of course you're still passing it around amongst each other. And Excel actually has an accessibility checker. Have you all used the accessibility checker in Excel ever? I know maybe some of you have used it in other Microsoft products. I'm sorry, what are you? Oh, okay. I'm just remembering how to do this. Share. We'll go back to the Excel file itself. So do you all have experience using Microsoft's accessibility checker? Some nodding, some not nodding. You can do that by going under File. Let me see. Is that what I wanted you to do? No, that's not what I wanted to do.
In Word and PowerPoint, it's under Review.
Yeah, right. That's right. The SharePoint controls are blocking the top there. So you go to Review and do check accessibility. And then it will tell you, if you have missing alt text or not. One thing it won't tell you, this is an unfortunate thing. If you use heading styles in a program like Word, it will announce them as headings. You have a way to format this as your heading, but it won't be announced to a screen reader user as a heading. It's just going to read it as plain text. So screen reader users navigate by listing headings, for example. So you can design it, and I don't know anybody who uses styles in Excel, but you can format text to be a heading 1 or heading 2. It's just not announced as such. So that's unfortunate. And why I'm bringing this up is the Excel accessibility checker is not going to tell you that, oh, your file's missing headings, or your headings are out of order, or your tables don't have table headers. It's not necessarily going to do that. So the accessibility checker in Excel is not as useful. It won't flag, if you're missing content in A1. It won't flag tables that are not defined or missing rows or columns. It won't flag the default sheet names. You call everything sheet 1, sheet 2. It won't flag it and say, hey, you should change these. It will flag missing alt text, but as with all alt text, it can't evaluate the quality. Does alt text really explain what you're telling it? And it will flag, I wish there was a color checker in Microsoft Office, but there isn't. It will flag cells that have low contrast, between the text and the background. But it can't test the charts that you've created to see if those pass the color contrast, unfortunately. So, all right, I'm going to get back to stop share and go back to the PowerPoint. Oops, what am I doing here? Share.
Question?
Okay.
So it's not something you've discussed, but it's something that came up at work recently. We had a discussion on best practice when it comes to table of contents for an Excel workbook.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think I've got that later on. But yeah, let's see. Do I have that one? No, I didn't do that one. Yeah, it's good practice to have a table of contents. If you have a big workbook and you want to help your users navigate. So let's try experimenting with that. And share Excel. All right, so how do you do a table of contents? You write. On your first worksheet, you write table of contents. So when the screen reader user goes to that first cell on the first sheet, they know what I'm not typing very well today. And you can type in, your title, whatever page, worksheet 1 or worksheet 2 in this case. And you can highlight it and right-click on it, or Control K? Why is this not working? I haven't done this one in the last few years, so excuse my. There we go. Control K in Windows. You select Place in Document, and you can take them to a table that you've named already, which we remember the name manager. You could take them to a worksheet. Let's take them to that table, and I'll click OK. And now you've got a table of contents. It takes you right to that spot. Yeah, especially if you've got more than one table on a worksheet, you can have the table of contents include a link to each individual table. So there's that. Is that answer your question?
yes, and the other thing that because I'm new at my job, so I'm still in training. This is why I'm asking, because it came up more as best practice, because they're trying to apply WCAG to Excel in a way. So the other thing that they recommended is, if it's a big workbook, to have a back link to the table of contents. Is that something that you also recommend as like a best practice in a big workbook?
I'm sorry, I don't. Can you repeat again? I'm trying to understand.
So if you have a table of contents in a big workbook,
Mm-hmm.
would you also add a link back to the table of contents?
You could. I've not seen that. Most people are doing that.
You could also provide instructions with the table of contents with the shortcut key for jumping back to the first sheet.
Yeah, thanks for that. I've not seen someone do the back link, but you can do it that way too. that seems like, that seems like it's going above and beyond, so.
That's what we do.
Okay, well, let me, do I have one of these examples? I'm not sharing anything, am I? Oh, no, I am. One of these files has have you all ever have to deal with forms, making a Excel file into a form? You have, okay, because that sounds like more advanced stuff.
It is not fun.
Let's see, name cells, practice. Oh, one of these has forms in it. I mean, I've got these on actually I could just show you the slides. Okay, here's an example of a table of contents, as you were suggesting. This is from 2018, so I actually went to trouble, so this takes you to the measures. And I don't have a back, or this takes you to the wait list. So yeah, it's the same concept. Let me go back to my PowerPoint. Share. Sorry for jumping all around. I know it's a bit confusing, but I wanted to open the actual app that we're talking about rather than just show you a slideshow. Okay, we already went through this end of worksheet. That's what I was looking for. The check for issues. That used to be on there, and this is what the checker will find and won't find. Yeah, I was saying heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. A screen reader user can't navigate by show me all the heading 2s in this file. You could style it like that, but it's not going to let you navigate with JAWS or NBA for that matter. So I don't know why. I guess Microsoft, one team isn't talking to the other. In Word, it works great, but converting, that's what I wanted to talk about. People convert their PDFs, their Excel files to PDFs. That is virtually a nightmare. That's how I got started in accessibility. I was fixing PDF tags, and I have not found a way to convert PDF Excel to PDF very successfully, unless you have a lot of time and you want to remediate the PDF file. Because the semantics, it's like saying that the column headers in here, that wouldn't come across. So maybe the text would convert okay, but you'd have to go in and touch up the tags in the PDFs.
Do you mean to convert it and keep the functionality, or just convert it?
Just convert it as text, yeah. Okay, so forms. There are form fields in Excel. But like what we were talking about, the charts and such, they're floating on top of the grid. So you can't, if you're a keyboard-only user or you're visually impaired, you can't reach the form fields. I haven't ever seen too many files like this. Usually they're just this straightforward form. And that's what I was going to go and discuss. Let's say you want to do a registration form. You can design it as such and make it look like this is an interactive file because you want people to enter in information. Maybe you've got a shared file that everybody's supposed to enter in their information. And notice here on the top, I have instructions. To move to input areas, press the tab key. We'll get to that a little bit later on. And use up and down arrows to read through the document. The next step is you could shade the input cells and just have that visual effect. This is where I want you to go. Of course, you don't want to use color combinations that are going to have trouble for people with color blindness. And oh no.
It was here, 227.
Oh shoot. I'm surprised anybody showed up to this class. Oh, well, if you want to go, it's okay. I won't be offended.
I want to hear about forms.
Oh, okay. So step one, I'm making this a name input field. Step two, I'm going under data validation while I've had that cell selected, and I can't, let me minimize this so I can show you. Step three, you select data validation. Step four, input area, and then input message. Enter in your name, format, last name, first name. So, and then click OK. And when a person is mousing over that field, they'll see that pop up. But also, if you're a screen reader user and you get to it, you'll hear it announced. So that's how you would do a name, address, or whatever the field's for. Does that make sense? Was it worth missing ice cream for? All right, well, this is just showing, oh, there's another thing. Checkboxes, people might want to use a checkbox. You could have a very narrow column, and the input could be, if you are on this, whatever the reason is, just type the letter X in there. You don't need a checkbox. And then the same way you could have people check it off in a sense. It's not as clean looking, but if you used a real Excel form checkbox, people are not going to be able to reach it. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Excel is not the greatest design tool anyway, but I would do it that way. The same concept. Anyone have to do drop-down lists in Excel? Okay, so using that same data validation setting, I mean the selection, instead of input message, you go to settings, you select list under allow, and you check in cell drop-down, and then you have to type in the different selections for the drop-down with commas between them like this. So when they get to the drop-down, they'll be able to navigate it and make their selection. Oh, I forgot to check this one again. There's a way to get to that drop-down as your keyboard-only user. I believe it's Control-Alt-Down arrow. But there is a way to reach that drop-down if you're a keyboard-only user and make the selection. So, yeah, that's it. So, if you have to do a drop-down, that's work, and that's accessible. And then if you have an input message, select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, whatever. You could have that as your input message when they land on that cell. Well, actually, no, you wouldn't want to do that for the drop-down. It's announced as a drop-down in JAWS. So yeah, this is just showing you an example of how the drop-down is displayed. And then there is an input message, put in number of tasks complete, so you can have an input message too, in addition to the drop-down on that cell. I think I'll skip this part. I kind of reviewed the accessibility checker already. Yeah, like it'll tell you have missing alt text. And if you have a defined table, it will tell you if a header row is not specified or not. It will warn you about those merged and split cells that we reviewed earlier. And if you have a lot of blank characters in a cell, it'll tell you that too. But there's a limitation on Excel accessibility. Give your title a name of some sort rather than, we do this all the time where I work because people will create a file and it adds your email address to it. And if I'm making an Excel file, I don't want necessarily people finding that and then saying, hey, Richard, this thing is messed up. I'm just the guy designing the file. I didn't come up with the orders for it. So you can anonymize it, like put the name of your organization in there instead, and give it a title. See, where it says John Doe, if you're John, you don't want to get emails from the public about this file. So change it to your organization name. And give it a title. It's definitive. This is, sales or, purchases for whatever period, just kind of explain what the file's about. Okay, we were talking about colors. I tested all the colors that come out. I'm going to stop sharing again. And I'm going to go back to Excel. Yeah, this is something that Microsoft hasn't done yet. I wish they would. You go in here and you select your drop-down colors. You don't know if yellow works with red or if red works with yellow, whatever it is. So that means you're going to have to manually figure out what colors work. Now, if you're only using these colors, and that's why I suggest, download this presentation. I kind of did that work for you. That if you use the colors I've highlighted on a white background, these pass color contrast. Conversely, if you have a black background, which is not as common in Excel, these colors work. But someday, let's hope Microsoft Office adds in a color checker for all of their apps, because
I think it does some sort of color checker, because I've had it tell me that I've got black text on black if I'm like hiding something.
Oh, okay. Well,
So it may have.
maybe they're adding it
In
incrementally.
the meantime, yeah.
But
The
it,
white on white that you were talking about, it may actually appear.
yeah, that's true. It would tell you. It would tell you that, hey, this is funky. Why did you do this? But if you do use colors outside of the Microsoft themes, then you have to go to the color contrast analyzer. Do we have folks here who have used that app before? Okay, so a few of you used it. I can show you. Basically, this is a free app from TPGI, and you use these eyedropper tools to measure your background and your foreground colors, and it tells you if it passes or fails. It's an extra step. Again, I hope someday something like this is built into Office, because it will tell you if that's black on black. But if you picked gray on black, that wouldn't pass color contrast. It wouldn't warn you necessarily. It might say low contrast, but it's not as robust. All right, that's all I have. I don't see anybody sleeping, so I must be doing something right. Do we have any questions? I got a question.
This is actually from my web administrator.
Oh my.
Is there a good way to make financial, I know you talked about it earlier, but is there a good way to make financial spreadsheets accessible? Because I work for the Water Development Board, so we have a lot of reports that have enormous spreadsheets. In fact, our state water plan had like 237 pages of spreadsheets.
Oh my goodness.
And they're like 11 by 17. They do include some like blank cells and some blank rows and things. So would it be best to like hide those blank rows and put the no data in the cells that don't have data, or what's your recommendation for something like that?
One blank row between each table, maximum. And if you hide it, it will be announced as hidden. So screen reader user is going to get to it and say, what am I missing? I'm missing 10 rows between here and there. I would get rid of them. If you have more than one table on a spreadsheet, then you can put a blank row between each table.
And then to even make matters worse, this then gets converted to PDF.
Oh, well, then you must have a great remediation department. One person.
One person.
I'm the only person on my team that does PDF still. I'm on a team where everybody's like, we've moved on, and we're into HTML, we're doing JavaScript, and I'm like, yeah, I do all that too, but nobody wants to do it. It's like slumming to fix PDF files.
Is it okay to kind of create visual spacing by using the alignment within the cell?
You mean like indenting the text?
Well, but also using it, you center it in the lower part instead of in the middle.
I'm not
I
quite
think
following
he's
you.
talking about the cell spacing.
Yeah, like
Oh,
you
yeah,
make it
sure.
a larger cell.
Yeah.
And you just kind
Yeah,
of
you
use
can
that
make
to play
you can
with
make
where
your
it goes.
column or row as big as you want to make the spacing. Yeah, I would do that rather than have 5, the rows are at the default depth. You
Yeah.
can just have one that is 5 rows deep.
And what about, you put a cell after like the heading, and you say, following is a 5-row or a 5-column chart depicting this, that gives some kind of a,
You would put it, well, you want to
but
put
you put it in hidden text.
You could do that, or you could put it under the chart itself. I was saying if your chart's like way off to the right or something, yeah, I would put it in the first column.
Yeah, but you could also, it'll double check. It'll be a double use if you put it in hidden text in that empty row. you
Yeah,
say.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
And you can also put any instructions you have, if there are instructions, or there are 10 tables on this worksheet, and here's table 1, whatever. I like the visually hidden text. Any other questions? I guess I finished a little bit early. It helped that you all have had experience with Microsoft Office already, the accessibility checker. All right, well, I don't know if, thank you. And go see if the ice cream's still here.
Please, if you get when you get a chance, fill out the session survey. The QR code or link is on that slide.